Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Game Week 34 free hit team selection and I'm getting ever closer to locking in my final draft. If you do enjoy today's video, please do smash that like button, and if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. Now, there will be a deadline decisions video out later today. It's actually going to be a double upload day, so do check out that video later. And if you're watching this and it's already out, make sure to go and watch that, where I'll talk about Liverpool and Arsenal and other teams in more detail. But I thought it was definitely worth at least discussing, before I show you my free hit team selection, Liverpool's minutes in Europe. So I'm recording this at 11 PM on Thursday after Liverpool have played. They did win 1-0, but they were knocked out. And I just wanted to discuss who got the minutes and what we think that might mean moving forward. But I'll be entirely honest, I have got no idea. I even think Mohamed Salah is a minutes risk. If you want the most nailed players, you're probably looking at McAllister, Van Dijk and Alisson, which doesn't blow me away. It's not particularly high upside, but Van Dijk and Alisson in particular could get you quite a few points, and you just know for a fact they're going to play all of the games. But on Thursday, in Europe, here are the minutes that each of the players got. So Alisson got 90. Definitely, if you have Kelleher now, I would not expect Kelleher to get any minutes. And Alisson is a fine pick for Game Week 34. Konate and Van Dijk both got 90 minutes. Van Dijk plays every game. Will Konate play both games in the double? My prediction would be no. I think Quansah might get one. But with Liverpool literally having nothing to go for other than the league, he could just run the players into the ground. This is also Klopp's last season. I'm not saying that he won't show that level of care to players, and obviously if they need a rest, they need a rest, but he might just run them into the ground and just absolutely go for the title. So Konate could start both in their double, but probably it's not worth the risk considering the lack of upside there. Robertson and Trent, I think, are the interesting ones because both of them actually started and both of them got a similar amount of minutes. Robertson got 79, Trent got 72. Robertson was, in my opinion, he looked the fitter of the two. And I don't necessarily mean the amount of distance covered, but just I suppose this is a bit of a stylistic thing. Trent often does stroll around, but Robertson just looks close to full fitness. That's just an eye test thing. That's just my opinion. Robertson's now played a couple of 90-minute games back-to-back. He then comes and plays 79 as well. And when Robertson got subbed off, he didn't look like he particularly needed it. I would say that Trent definitely had the better performance. I think Trent was highly impressive. He was very attacking. But Trent looked like he needed that substitution. He also wasn't supposed to get the amount of minutes that he got in Game Week 33. That was only because Bradley came off injured. So for me, my prediction is, despite Trent looking okay for those 72 minutes, my prediction would be that Trent still only starts one in the double. Whereas I think Robertson is significantly more likely, at least for me, and this is just an opinion, to start both in 34. But they got a similar amount of minutes. And you could look at this and just say, Trent's just got, what was it, like 45 minutes in Game Week 33. He then comes and plays 72 here. Looks pretty good. Who's to say he doesn't start both of them? I would just predict that he doesn't. And I would predict that actually Gomez probably starts this weekend at right back. If I had to predict, I would say Gomez against Fulham at right back, and then Trent gets the second game against Everton. And then maybe from Everton onwards, maybe we do see Trent start every game. That's just my prediction. It could be horribly wrong. It could be that Robertson only gets one game, and actually Trent gets both of them. But that's just the way that I see it at the moment. When we move on to the midfielders and the attackers, still, I have absolutely no idea what this means. But Luis Diaz, Salah, and Gakpo started with Jota and Darwin on the bench. Salah and Diaz, in my opinion, were really, really disappointing. Diaz maybe even more so than Salah, but Salah just doesn't look at it at the moment. And in all honesty, I do not believe for a second that Salah and Diaz were subbed off because they were being kept for the Prem. I think they were both rubbish. And Salah in particular, he's just not looking very good at the moment. But I don't think this was a rest thing. I think they just both weren't very good, which is why Darwin and Jota were brought on. In fact, once again, and this isn't the first time in recent weeks, Gakpo has looked the most impressive Liverpool attacker. So I look at this and I think Gakpo could genuinely get a start in the double because he probably deserves it ahead of some of the other players. Again, Darwin not starting, I don't think that was a good thing. I look at this team and it is pretty much full strength, but Gakpo got the nod. So whilst Darwin is going to start at least one in the double, I'd be very surprised if he doesn't. I don't think this screams out Darwin was getting a rest. I think it screams out Darwin is not in their first choice 11 potentially at the moment. Again, could be completely wrong, but predicting minutes moving forward, does this mean that because Diaz only got 66, he's fine to start both? Or did Jota and Darwin coming off the bench suggest that they might be in for a start in Game Week 34 in the first game? Does Gakpo get another? I've got absolutely no idea. And it's one of the things that is really putting me off Liverpool midfield. You will see my team in a second. I'm struggling. Luis Diaz feels, along with Salah, like maybe the most safe for minutes, but based on this, Darwin maybe starts the next one, and does Jota get the nod against Fulham? Again, I've got absolutely no idea. So it's not been a particularly useful section, I'm sure, for you, this, but it's just to show that Liverpool minutes, I think, are a minefield, and I don't even feel fully secure about Salah. The only 3 players I feel secure about for minutes is Alisson, Van Dijk, McAllister. So maybe you do just play the expected minutes there, but it doesn't feel particularly exciting. So there we go. That is the amount of minutes that Liverpool players got on Thursday night. Let's now take a look at my free hit team selection. So before we move on to discussing my team and looking at the players in detail, there are 2 things that I wanted to mention. The first thing is, on a free hit and in a single game week, and I said this in my game week preview video, statistics are important, but they are significantly less important. And picking the correct best players, again, is always important, but is less important in a single game week. And what I mean by that is, over a 4 to 6 game week period, I think I can look at 2 players and say, one of these players is just a better FPL option. I think they will outscore the other player. And same with stats. I will say the stats for this player is better. Therefore, over this 4 to 6 game week period, I expect the better player to get the more points. But in a single game week, you just never know what's going to happen. Variance occurs. And again, if you look at the dream team every single week in FPL, the players that score the most points, there are random CDMs that pick up like 15 points and defenders that show no goal threat getting a goal and a clean sheet. So I'm not saying go out there and pick terrible players, but picking a slightly suboptimal player ahead of a player that on paper is slightly better in a single game week on a free hit, I don't think it's a horrible idea. So you'll see in a second, I'll discuss it in more detail in a minute, but White versus Gabriel. Gabriel's probably a better pick, but could you tap into some variance? Maybe just get a little bit lucky with White outscoring him? Absolutely. So that's the first thing, is there might be some suboptimal picks here that you don't understand, but you just never know in FPL. The next thing I wanted to say is changing one of these players changes, for me, a minimum of 2, but normally 4. Because let's say I decide I actually want to go for double Arsenal defence, well then that means that one of my defenders has to change, one of my midfielders change, and often if one of the midfielders changes, that means I might want to squeeze in another Palace one, which means Henderson drops out. So it almost like cascades from there, and I can't think of any changes in my team where it's just a single person would come out and a single one would come back in. It causes various things to change. So if you see me going into the deadline with a completely different team, it's not that I've lied to you and changed my mind on loads of stuff. It's literally a change in opinion on one player, especially if it's one that you're tripled up on. It can change everything. So with those 2 things in mind, the current team that I'm lining up with is in a 3-5-2, and I've got 9.2 mil in the bank. So really, money is no issue here. Projected according to Fantasy Football Hub to get me 123.2 points. So starting with the goalkeepers, I've currently got Henderson and Pickford as my chosen 2. In isolation, Alisson and Raya are the best 2 keepers. I would say Alisson is the very best one, then followed by Raya, just because Alisson at least makes saves, and he's actually pretty decent for bonus points as well, whereas Raya is just like a 6-point merchant. He's not going to get you much more than that usually anyway. In this double, however, Alisson probably will make more saves than normal, because Wolves are fairly attacking, and Chelsea, not great defensively, but they've been attacking well too. So I look at this and I think, actually, saves-wise, Raya will probably make slightly more than normal. But the reason that I've not gone for Alisson and Raya is there are other goalkeepers that make a hell of a lot more saves. And I like a lot of the other Arsenal and Liverpool defenders and other players in the outfield too. So it's not that I don't like Alisson and Raya, I just think I'd rather go for another goalkeeper and pick other Arsenal and Liverpool players. When it comes down to who to select in that goalkeeper spot, I like Henderson and I like Pickford. And to some extent, I even like Jose Sarr, because they've got 2 home fixtures and they're also playing against attacks that will shoot, because like I said, you don't want just clean sheets, you also want some save points too. And I just think the person that has the best balance of everything probably is Henderson. Henderson makes a lot of saves. He's actually playing for a very good defence. Crystal Palace, whether that be under Hodgson or Glasner, actually defend fairly well. But I also don't think that West Ham in particular are like some elite attack. And they are now, obviously, they've played on Thursday as well. They did very, very well against Leverkusen. But they are going to be probably quite tired, leggy, whatever you want to call it. And I could see it a clean sheet for Crystal Palace in that first game. I don't expect a clean sheet against Newcastle. But across the 2, both being home games, we know how good Palace are at Selhurst Park. Saves too. I just really like Henderson. And I like the idea of having one Crystal Palace defender. I think Pickford's fine, and I think Pickford against Forest is probably one of the better chances for a clean sheet in the double, but I just really don't like that game against Liverpool particularly. Although the Merseyside derby sometimes is quite tight, I just think he's going to concede there. So you're looking at, you really need a clean sheet against Forest. So I think Henderson versus Pickford's close, but I'm just about backing Henderson at the moment. Then when we move on to the defence, I've gone back and forth on this a hell of a lot, but in pretty much every free hit draft, my 3 defenders that I'm starting have been from Liverpool and Arsenal. In fact, I don't think there's been a single draft that I've built, at least in the last few days, where it doesn't have a back 3 of Liverpool and Arsenal defenders. And the reason for that is I do think the attackers from both teams are very nice. And I've even built a draft. I didn't like it straight away, but you can have triple Liverpool attack and triple Arsenal attack, and then just go for some random defenders that you think might get you a goal or an assist. I don't even hate that, but I just think that there are lots of really good attackers that I like. From maybe weaker teams with maybe slightly weaker underlying data, but I just like them for different reasons. Whereas with the defenders, I really don't like many of them, if any of them. And I know the likes of Munoz, Senesi, Mikalenko, Tarkovsky, Nuri if he looks fit, they are all okay picks, but none of them blow me away, whereas a lot of the Arsenal Liverpool defenders I do really like for attacking threat, but also clean sheet potential. And we spoke about the fact that, yes, they are likely to score the most goals in this double, but these two teams are also most likely to keep clean sheets, right? So it's finding that balance between you want attackers from these teams, but you also want defenders from these teams. Ideally, we'd have like 5 or 6 from each, but you can't do that. So I think in an ideal world, you probably have at least 2 defenders from Arsenal and Liverpool. In my case, I've chosen 3 at the moment, just because I don't like any of the other defenders, particularly from the other teams. And so if we are suggesting that we're going to have 3 from Liverpool and Arsenal in the defence, definitely statistically, the combination that makes the most sense is double Arsenal defence with 1 Liverpool defender to then allow more Liverpool attackers, because statistically, Arsenal are the best defence in the league and Liverpool are the best attack in the league. But I'm seeing a couple of things recently, right? And this is maybe me reading into it too much. I think that recently, Liverpool's attack hasn't been as free-flowing. I think it's something like 350 minutes now they've gone without scoring a goal from open play. And I know they've played 180 of those minutes against Atalanta, who are a very decent defence, but they're just not quite clicking at the moment. On top of that, there's lots of rotation in the Liverpool attack, which we'll discuss a bit later. And whilst I do think Arsenal are very solid defensively, I wouldn't be surprised if they rotate 1 or 2 of their defenders in these games. And they've played a lot of minutes themselves as well. So I'm not saying that I think Liverpool are going to keep 2 clean sheets, score no goals, and Arsenal concede in both games. I'm not that silly. But could I see a world in which Arsenal don't keep 2 clean sheets here, Liverpool do keep 1 at least, and maybe get some attacking returns from the defenders? I absolutely could. And it goes back to what I said at the start of this section, where in a single game week, just anything could happen. I absolutely think Robertson and Van Dijk could outscore Gabriel. Do I think it's statistically likely? Maybe not. I mean, Gabriel's very high for projected points, but it's a possibility. So I quite like the idea of going against the grain slightly, rather than going double Arsenal defence, actually going for double Liverpool defence, which of course offers the opportunity for me in the attack to go for double Arsenal attack. I'm not suggesting you follow suit, and people might hate this. They'll go, Liverpool are terrible defensively. Across the last 6, they're actually second for expected goals conceded, right? And across the season, they're one of the top teams for clean sheets. So I don't think they're a bad defence at all, but some people will suggest they are. That's fine. Just go for 1 Liverpool, go for no Liverpool defenders. But I quite like this combination. So if I'm going to go for this combination of 2 Liverpool defenders and 1 Arsenal defender, you've still got choices, right? So on the Arsenal defence, Gabriel is probably the best asset to own in FPL because he's got the highest goal threat. He's absolutely elite from set pieces. And therefore, you could get like a big 15-pointer from him, where I think you're probably less likely to get an attacking return from White, although still possible. And Saliba just doesn't show much attacking threat at all. But the way that I'm viewing this is kind of going back to this idea of you never know what will happen in a single game week. Across this 8-game week period, I'd much rather own Gabriel. But in a single game week, we've seen it in the past, White can outscore him, and he's got a much lower ownership. And I'm not saying that you should base your decisions all around ownership, but if Gabriel is going to be, by the way, he was about 82% owned at my rank. That's without everyone free hitting this week and also owning Gabriel. He's going to be like 95% owned. You might see that and say, actually, that's a reason to pick him because I don't want to lose all those points. But I'm seeing it as, if White can outscore him at like 20% owned, I'm still getting the same clean sheet potential, assuming that White starts both. I'm also still getting a bit of attacking threat. You just never know. And what I like about Ben White is actually the early subs. He's getting subbed early quite a lot. As long as he makes it to 60, if he comes off early and then Arsenal concede, it's actually a decent chance for banking a clean sheet that other players might not get. The issue will be is, and I'd love to know down below if you think this, the issue is if White's obviously benched in one of them, but I think there's a small, and I mean like a small chance, Kivior starts 1 game ahead of Gabriel. Gabriel was played a lot of minutes himself too, so I don't think it's a dead cert that if one of them gets one of them gets benched, it's actually Ben White and not Gabriel. Probably the safest one to go for is Saliba. Anyway, I'm going to stop rambling against Arsenal defenders. I'll have at least 1 Arsenal defender. I have no idea who it is. I would love to know, I'm kind of chasing a little bit because I really want to try and get into the top 25k, maybe push towards top 10k. Would you just go for Gabriel, or do you think there's a decent shout to go for White or Saliba? But I will have at least one Arsenal defender. Then I've got 2 Liverpool defenders, and actually Trent's not in there, which maybe is the surprising one. I think I've just convinced myself that I don't think that Trent's going to start both in the double. And if I don't think he starts both in the double, I don't love picking him, because whilst he can do damage in a single game, we've seen how good Trent can be. With defenders, I want them to start both because I want the opportunity for a clean sheet in each of the games. And so if I don't think Trent starts both, I don't think it's the wisest pick. But he does have such incredibly high upside that it is still very tempting to pick him, even if I don't think he starts both. But at the moment, I've got Van Dijk and Robertson, because Robertson's still got the attacking threat. But I think because of the stage of the recovery that he's at and his own fitness journey, I think Robertson's more likely to start both than Trent. Maybe not massively more likely, but I think slightly more likely. And then with Van Dijk, it's just safety of minutes. So even if Robertson only starts one, I've still got a Liverpool defender for both games in the double. So I kind of like this combination of Robertson and Van Dijk. Also, Robertson takes set pieces and Van Dijk's a monster. And again, I've built up this fake narrative in my head that doesn't exist, this hypothetical situation where Robertson whips in a corner and Van Dijk scores a bullet header, and I'm loving life. So I just like this combination of defenders at the moment. In all honesty, I think the only change that is possible is Van Dijk becomes Gabriel, because I think I want Robertson. Like, I've convinced myself that Robertson's the one that I want to go for. High upside, differential, more likely to start both. So unless I have a sudden change of heart, Robertson will be in there. I think I want to go for Ben White as well. Maybe I'll change my mind on that one if we really expect him to maybe be benched in one. And if I want Ben White, it's just that final spot. Do I go for double Liverpool defence or do I go for double Arsenal defence? And at the moment, I'm just about leaning Van Dijk. So with that very long ramble about my defence over, let's now move on to the midfield 5. So moving on to the midfield 5, and this is kind of very dependent upon what happens with the defence, but also the defence is dependent upon what happens with the midfield. Like I said, you change one part and it all suddenly changes. But if I'm going off the basis that I'm going to have double Liverpool defence, well then, if I want to fill up my 3 Arsenal spots, I then have to have double Arsenal attack. Whereas if Van Dijk becomes Gabriel, then all of a sudden I've gone double Arsenal defence and I want double Liverpool attack. So this is the situation for a lot of people that they're currently choosing between. I will just say that I can have both double Arsenal and double Liverpool. I just have to probably drop Van Dijk, change him to another defender, and then bring in like a Luis Diaz or a Jota. But let me discuss the midfielders that I've got, and then I'll discuss options that I've obviously not got. Salah is currently my captain, and he's in, but this is very reluctant. I would not be surprised if Salah doesn't start both in Game Week 34. And people will say, what are you resting him for? I don't think it's resting him for anything. I don't think he's been very good recently. He's just not. And he's getting some chances, but even in the last few, he's getting less chances. And yes, he scored a couple of penalties, but outside of that, he's really not offering that much. So I think we'll probably see him start both, but I think he'll get 2 early subs. And I don't think he's a fantastic captaincy shout. But all of the other players that I might want to captain are either a bit unreliable, playing for unreliable teams, don't have the best fixtures, or their minutes aren't reliable. And so it's just kind of a reluctant place in the armband on Salah because it's Salah. But if I was convinced by anyone else, I think I would go there. So at the moment, reluctantly, I've got Salah with the armband. And I've also semi-reluctantly got Saka in my team. But I do think Saka's fine. His underlying data hasn't been great recently. And also, in a similar way to Salah, his minutes haven't even been great recently. So you look at this, and I haven't even thought about going without Salah and Saka because of who they are and because they're on pens. But I don't think either of them have been great in recent weeks. But they're such brilliant players, we know they are, over a consistently long period of time, that they can just turn it on at any point. So I've got Salah and Saka. I don't feel great about either, and I don't feel great about captaining either as well. The player that I am quite excited to have, and it's one of the reasons I'm currently going for one Arsenal defender, is Kai Havertz. His data's good. He's passing the eye test. I think he's absolutely critical to everything that Arsenal do. And I actually do love that he can play in 2 positions, because even if even if Arteta wants to give Jesus 1 game as the 9, or if he wants to give Trossard 1 game as the 9, Havertz could just simply drop into midfield. So I like the fact that Havertz is very, very versatile, but I expect him to start at least 1 as the number 9. And when he starts as the number 9 in particular, the data's great, and he's actually been finishing his chances this season as well. So I really like the idea of Havertz, because most people that aren't free hitting, I think, will have double Arsenal defence. So I am perfectly happy backing double Arsenal attack against the defenders. It could go horribly wrong. It absolutely couldn't. If Havertz only starts 1 in the double, this will be a really big mistake probably. But he could do something off the bench in the one that he doesn't start. The other player obviously is Ødegaard that I could consider, but Ødegaard's been carrying a bit of a knock. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's actually Ødegaard that misses one in the double. He doesn't tend to miss minutes, by the way. I know that he starts and plays 90 in pretty much every game. But who's to say that he isn't the one? We don't know what's happening behind the scenes, what the physios are suggesting. Maybe it's that Ødegaard is the one in the red zone, as we call it, and Havertz is actually fine. Havertz doesn't do that much off-the-ball work, and he tends to look pretty fit. So I'm not saying I'm confident that Havertz gets 2 starts, but I'm predicting it at the moment, and therefore he's in my starting 11. And it will be a double Arsenal attack at the moment. But I've gone back and forth on going double Arsenal defence, like I said, and actually going for only one attacker. If I fit out 3 spots, therefore, with Havertz, Salah, and Saka, I've got 2 more. Eze has been absolutely locked in my draft, and he's not a differential. Everyone's going for Eze this week, and you could absolutely see him being that one player that everyone brings in, and he massively disappoints. But he's got everything. He's got minutes. He's got the data. He's got the 2 home fixtures against 2 pretty poor defences. West Ham have just played in Europe. Newcastle have not defended well this season away from home or at home, to be honest. I just love everything about Eze. And we think that he's on penalties. We don't know that. It could be Elise, but we think it's probably Eze. So I don't need to talk much about Eze. Everyone's going to have him this week. He is probably the best captaincy shout outside of Salah for me. And if I'm going to go outside of Salah, I may well give it to Eze. But it feels pretty crazy captaining Eze in a double ahead of Salah. It just doesn't sit quite right with me. If we knew that Eze was on pens, I might feel slightly better about it. So that's 4. Those 4 have been in most of my drafts recently. And then the 5th midfielder, who actually hasn't left many, is Brereton Diaz. Now, everyone's going to say, and I got so many comments on the videos that I posted in the tweets, I just don't understand Brereton Diaz as a pick, which is great. It's one of the reasons that I love him as a pick, because you might feel like he's been in loads of teams, but I guarantee he's at like 2 or 3% ownership come the deadline. No one's going to really go for him. A few people have been like, oh, I might go for him, but they probably won't. In fact, I might not, to be fair, but he's been in most of my drafts. I just like having one player that barely anyone owns, that if they pop off, it just feels amazing. So this is a bit of a fun element, but it's not just a fun element. He has got the same data as Havertz and Eze across the season, who loads of people are just picking happily. In recent weeks, he's got better data than the likes of Saka, and he's got the best 2 fixtures in the double. He's playing against 2 of the worst defences in the league in Burnley and Manchester United. Like, I feel like Diaz is getting too much disrespect at this point. I thought he might become a bandwagon, but it's almost going in the other direction where people are really rejecting him as a pick. I also think there's a very small chance he might take a penalty if McBurney's not on the pitch. And he's been very, very nailed. He's playing as the number 9 alongside McBurney in like a 3-5-2 formation or 5-3-2 formation. I just really like Brereton Diaz as a pick. I've got very little bad things to say about him. And again, I like that he might be a bit of a differential pick that not many people will own. I suppose the real issue with Brereton Diaz isn't probably Brereton Diaz himself. It's more so what he blocks, because there are lots of really good midfielders that we could choose this week. And so in terms of what he blocks, first thing he blocks is Elise. Now, I've already got Triple Palace. Spoiler alert for the attackers. I've got Triple Palace already, so I still would have to drop another Palace player. But a lot of people looking at Elise as a really good option, and I don't have an issue with that at all. He's got really good data. Again, good fixtures, as we said with Eze. Could be on penalties. And I think there is a chance that he starts both in the double, but he's also just come back from injury. And I'm not sure that he definitely starts both. So why not go for a player with arguably better fixtures, similar data, and a player that does look at the moment like he's going to play 90 minutes in both, in Brereton Diaz. So Diaz versus Brereton Diaz versus Elise. I don't think I want to go for Elise personally. It's just my preference that I prefer Brereton Diaz. But what he really blocks me from, and it's why I am still tempted to drop him, is I could remove Van Dijk, go for a Mikalenko or Tarkowski in that spot, or go for like Munoz and then switch Henderson to Pickford. But basically drop Van Dijk and I can still get a Liverpool attacker in that spot. And so what it then becomes, let's say that I keep Henderson, what it becomes is something like Tarkowski or Mikalenko and Luis Diaz or Jota versus Van Dijk and Brereton Diaz. And I do think that is very, very close. Because at the moment, I've got no Liverpool attackers outside of Salah, which seems a bit crazy when I say that out loud. But again, they've not scored many goals recently. And whilst the underlying data has been there, none of them are finishing their chances. And my real issue with the Liverpool attackers isn't necessarily the lack of conversion, because I think they've got some great players. They'll still create chances. It's who do I actually back to start to? Jota probably won't start to. Just come back from injury. He's still not... Has he started a game? He might have started. I don't even know if he started a game. Been coming off the bench a lot. Is he going to just play back-to-back games that are only a couple of days apart? Probably not. Diaz feels the most likely, but with Darwin capable of playing on the left, Jota now back, and Gakpo actually capable on the left. We've seen that in the past when players come off from the bench. Gakpo can play that. Or like I said, Gakpo can play through the middle and push Jota and Darwin out. Does Diaz even start both now? I'm not entirely sure he does. I could squeeze Darwin in as a forward, which we'll discuss when we move on to the forwards. That's an option. I just don't know who starts two from Liverpool in the attack. And maybe you don't need that, right? Liverpool attackers have very high upside. So maybe you just say, do you know what? Probably none of them start both, but you're going to get one start and you're going to get minutes off the bench. Maybe you just back that. But then I think if I'm expecting 110 minutes from them, why not go for Brereton Diaz with 180 and have Van Dijk, who I know will start both? So that's why I've come to this conclusion, actually, that I quite like this midfield five, but it's not perfect. Salah and Saka's minutes won't be perfect. Havertz could only start one. Brereton Diaz plays for Sheffield United. So it's not the perfect midfield five, and it won't be overly popular, I'm sure. But that's why I've settled where I'm at the moment. So I think I've discussed everyone I want to discuss there. Wolves midfielders don't really interest me due to minutes and also not knowing who's on pens and the fixtures as well. So I think the only change that I can foresee here is one of Jota or Diaz coming in for either Havertz or Brereton Diaz. Salah, Saka, Eze have been in every draft, but those Havertz and Diaz spots could be Luis Diaz, Jota, Ødegaard, or I could switch to a 3-4-3, but I'm pretty happy for now. Let's move on to the two forwards and discuss the team overall. So guys, moving on to the two forwards, we have Mateta and Solanke at the moment with Cunha on the bench. And those probably are my three favourite forwards for Game Week 34. Probably Darwin would be in there, but then, as I said, I've already got the triple up. So it makes it a little bit more difficult because it's not just going for Darwin. It's going for Darwin at the expense of another Liverpool asset. Solanke's been a topic of discussion for a lot of free hitters because everyone owns Solanke, so you're not gaining anything with Solanke. It feels defensive, but I'm not selecting Solanke because of his ownership. I'm selecting him because I think he's the best forward for 34, because he's got some of the best data. I actually think these two fixtures aren't too bad. Villa defensively across the season are okay, but recently they've not been. Again, they played 120 minutes in Europe. I actually think Solanke's a captaincy shout. I could captain Solanke. I think he's that good of an option as a forward. So I'm not considering going without him. I just think the only reason I would go without Solanke is to try and get one up on those that aren't free hitting and just to take a massive risk that I don't back personally. So I think if I'm ever making a decision which I don't even back as being a good one, then I don't think I should make it. So for me, Solanke is going to be in, but I don't think he's at like essential status. I think you could definitely go against him if you wanted to, but I don't want to myself. I think he's absolutely fine as a player, which then leaves one spot for Mateta or Cunha. And I've been going back and forth on this quite a lot, but the decision that I've come to is probably Mateta, because I think Mateta and Cunha, underlying data-wise, since Glasner's come in, I think Cunha versus Mateta, if they had equally good fixtures, would be equally good options. I think they'll get a similar amount of chances. I don't think one or the other is a significantly better finisher. Cunha could be on penalties, which is something in his advantage, but a lot of people seem to think that it's still Sarabia, so we'll have to wait and see on that one. We don't know that he's on pens. So if I think basically Mateta and Cunha are equally good options, the only thing I can go off is minutes and fixtures, and I think Mateta's minutes will be slightly more secure, even though Edouard is waiting in the wings if they need him. I think Cunha's just come back from injury, so I expect Mateta's minutes to be slightly higher, and I prefer Mateta's fixtures massively. Cunha's got the most difficult double for me against Arsenal and Bournemouth. Those are two pretty decent defences. So I think I'm just backing Mateta more at the moment. And I haven't taken Mateta out in the last 2 days. He's been there ahead of Cunha. The only real thing that would change this for me is if I just decide that I want to get Darwin in there, because I do love Darwin, and I do expect Darwin to start at least one in the double. So it would be Van Dijk and Mateta coming out, or Cunha. Mateta would drop to the bench, and it would basically be Darwin and Munoz versus Van Dijk and Mateta. And I do think that's close as well. And then you might say you don't want to go double Palace defence. Well, then I could take out Henderson and go for Pickford if I wanted to, which could be an option. But Darwin's just not been good recently. And I don't even think in the one that he starts, he'll get 90. So I think what you could see from Darwin is like 65 and 20. So you might not even get 90 minutes in totality from Darwin across the double. And therefore, I'm just not loving it. He just doesn't finish his chances. He doesn't haul. And he might haul in this double, but we've seen nothing from him in the past to suggest that in a single game, he can take like 2 or 3 chances. He just doesn't do it. So at the moment, I think I'm just backing this security of minutes and the slightly better double fixtures-wise that you'll get from Mateta. So that is the way that the team is currently lining up. There are a few different picks in here. I know it is largely template, but I like the double Liverpool defence. I maybe like backing against Gabriel and going for White or Saliba. I like Havertz, Brereton, Diaz. It is a little bit different, but not different just for the sake of being different. I also really like the picks that are in there. So I'd love to know down below in the comments, what do you think about this team? I'll discuss it in more detail in the deadline stream, right? Because I might make lots of changes in the deadline stream. And like I said, that isn't me lying to you now saying this is the team I'm going with. It's just if you change one player, everything changes. Like, for example, if I do Havertz to Jota, and I do really, really like the idea of Jota, by the way. If I do Havertz to Jota, well, then Van Dijk has to come out. And if Van Dijk doesn't go to an Arsenal defender, then I've got... Do you know what I mean? It just starts moving around a lot. So I'll leave it there, because that was incredibly chaotic. But I would love to know down below in the comments, what do you think about my free hit team? So guys, I thought I'd update on how I'm getting on in my role as football manager for South London United as part of One Future Football. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about here, please do stick around. But first, there will be an announcement video linked down below where I explain what my role is as manager of South London United. It'll be the first thing in the description. Please go and check that out, because I would love your support here. You can actually support my club and help me to train the players as well, which would be absolutely massive. So go check that announcement video out down below. But I thought I would just show you my team selection ahead of round 3, because I've made some serious changes. I've actually ditched the 3 at the back already because I didn't feel fully comfortable in it. The only reason I went for it is I wanted to get more players in more attacking positions and just try something new, because last season we played 4 at the back, we weren't creating chances, we finished bottom of the league, and it just went horribly wrong. So I thought, do you know what? I'll try and go with 2 up front to provide Sinclair with some support. I'll go 3 at the back and put all of my basically attacking stats all the way up. I basically went as attacking as I could, and we still weren't creating. So I could have sat on that for a little bit, but I've made a few key changes. I've gone to 4 at the back and brought in the Indian centre-back Prasad. If you're watching this and you're from India, big love to India. I know quite a few people that watch these videos are from India. We've got the Indian defender Prasad coming in. And what that means is we've removed one of the midfielders, but not only that, we're actually now putting a lot of players in their preferred positions. And when I look at this now, I'm like, why didn't I start the season in this formation? Because Sabri is now in a more attacking position, which is where he can do absolute damage. Moyano is actually traditionally a right winger, not a forward. I just wanted to provide some support for Sinclair, but he's better on the right. And Grondon, who is comfortably our best player, we saw that in round 2 when he actually scored. He's an attacking midfielder, not a right midfielder. So when I look at this, actually now most people are in their preferred positions. And I just feel more confident as a football manager in a 4 at the back, because I'm a little bit old school and it just works better for me. So we're going to go into round 3 at home, which is big, against Manhattan FC in a 4-3-3, pretty attacking. I've upped the attacking stats even more. My hope in this game is we score lots of goals. I don't care if we concede. I just want to score at least 2 or 3 goals in this game. That is the aim. So those are the changes that I've made. Big shout out to the top fans for this week, which are the people that have trained the most of the South London United players, which is Gunner1886, Dishead, Keaton Rana, Sam Driver, Mr. Dano, ATS997, Con5858, and Mortadi, sorry for butchering your name. Thank you for training the South London players. If you are not currently training the South London United players, if you own a South London United card, go to training on the One Future Football website and train the hell out of that player, because it improves them and it makes it more likely that I'll win. And if you have not yet signed up to support South London United and you're still watching, head over to One Future Football. There is a link down below in the description. Once you're on One Future Football, make sure that you select South London United as your club to support. So you go to the top right corner, click dashboard, select South London United, and you become an official fan of the club. And then if you check in for every single match, you can actually own shares in the club and you can help to decide what we do moving forward as a club. So I want you to get involved in this journey. If you have any questions, DM me on social media, email me, comment down below, and I'll be happy to clear anything up. But let's hope that we get a win in round 3 with this new attacking 4-3-3 formation. So guys, there we have it. That is my Game Week 34 free hit team selection. Hopefully you did enjoy it. And if you did, please do smash that like button. And if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. Until next time, bye-bye.